Welcome to the Dusty Jobs Podcast from Imperial Systems. Industry knowledge to make your job easier and safer.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dusty Jobs Podcast. Thanks for listening again. And today we have joining us Bob Dayringer from retired MyOHSA. Did I say your last name right, Bob?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So he has been a senior industrial hygienist for, how many years did you have in the industry, Bob?
39 and a half years.
Wow.
I was with MyOHSA for 39 and a half. I was a CIH for 30 some years.
Now, what's a CIH? I'm not familiar with that term.
A CIH is Certified Industrial Hygienist.
Gotcha.
The professional way of saying that you know what you're doing.
Gotcha. So those are some initials that give you a little bit of credibility.
Yeah, it's the American Board of Industrial Hygiene sponsors a two-part test that you take to become certified.
Gotcha.
It's a fairly rigorous test.
So I'm sure over the time you were doing that, probably the industry changed so much during that time frame. I imagine you saw innovations and regulations and a lot of stuff change, huh?
Quite a lot of change, yes, sir. Over those years, I've said that industrial hygiene isn't quite as exciting now as it used to be because standards move along. They find out things are worse for you than they originally thought, so they lower exposure limits. And when they lower exposure limits, industry tends to move away from those issues, from those things, and the workplace gets a little safer, and it's not quite as exciting when you go into the industries because some of the bad things that were there no longer exist.
So it's not as exciting in a good way. Things are starting to just be safer.
Exactly. Exciting is not always a good thing.
Yeah. So it's still very interesting and intriguing, but there's no one probably getting as sick as they used to or as injured as they used to.
It makes the days fun when you constantly get a chance to learn new things, to see new things.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, okay, so we kind of talked a little bit about what an industrial hygienist is, but we kind of gave a broad definition. What did you say? Would this be something someone would go to college for, or is this how did you find your way into it, and what does it actually mean a day to day?
I found my way into it by luck, actually. I was just out of college with a degree in biology and chemistry, working as a chemist in a chemical manufacturing facility, and it became my job to escort the MyOHSA guys through the plant when they came to visit us. And I saw what they were doing, and I thought, boy, this looks like a lot more fun than what I'm doing. So I applied and eventually got into MyOHSA. And then there was a big learning curve.
Oh, I can imagine. Is it, so you started out meeting these guys and then said, I think I'll do that. And then, so what is a day typically in a person who is doing an industrial hygienist? What would that be? Is it a lot of visiting factories? How does it go about? Like if I was going to shadow you for the day, what would it look like?
Most of my days would be going to an industry somewhere. I was in consultation, so I went out at the request of the facility. I was able to talk to them beforehand, determine what their concern was, maybe do some research about that material or that concern, and then go to their facility, do air contaminant or noise monitoring, review ventilation systems to see if they were working as they were supposed to, those types of things. It's kind of like being a risk assessment detective. You look for things that can cause risk for the employee.
I gotcha. So I mean, 39 years you were doing this. What were some of the most common things you would run into during that time frame? And I'm sure it's changed, yeah, like we talked about earlier. But what was some stuff that typically you could walk in and say, "Wow, I see this a lot," and it really helped people out with it?
I would say three things. First of all, noise exposure. The noise is everywhere in industry, and many people are overexposed to noise and lose hearing because of that. Number two on the list would be welding fume exposure. I wrote more citations, more hazards for an air contaminant exposure for welding fume than anything else by far.
Huh. Wow.
And then thirdly would be bad ventilation systems. Things that were installed to help protect the employee that really didn't do much or didn't work correctly.
I gotcha. So there's something there that's in place, but maybe the design of it or just how it was actually functioning wasn't working to...
It just wasn't up to what they intended it to do.
I gotcha. Good intentions, bad design, possibly.
Lots of times.
Yeah. So, in all these times, do you have any? You got any stories about maybe when you ran into something like that, where you were just like, "This is not working out at all"?
One of the ones that really comes to mind is you have to spend your money wisely. I went into a foundry years ago, and my first day there, they were so proud. They had just put in this new exhaust ventilation system in the core making room. And they said, I asked, "Why did you put this in?" They said, "Well, it smells really bad in there." So we spent a few $100,000 trying to get rid of this bad smell. And of course I said, "Well, what is that bad smell? Is it something hazardous? Is it just a bad smell?" Well, we don't really know. It smells bad. People have complained, so we spent the money. Across the door into the other half of the foundry, it was a leaded brass foundry. Their lead exposure was so high they had people off on medical leave. It was really hazardous. And they had spent hundreds of thousands to get rid of a bad smell and done nothing about the lead.
Oh my.
I always have to say, spend your money wisely. There's only so much in that suitcase to spend. They had several employees that were off on medical leave because of high elevated blood leads. It was very hazardous.
Did you just say, "Hey, why don't we just take this pipe that you put here and put it over there so that to help with that lead, huh?"
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It has to be designed specifically. But yeah, you should have taken this block of money and spent it in the foundry and not in the building.
Yeah. They should have had you in there before they started making these decisions, huh?
I think it would have been a lot better. I certainly would have said, "Don't do this."
Okay, so let's say there is a setting. Let's say you talked a lot about weld exposure.
Yes.
In this setting, it was lead exposure. How would a person even know that? How would they go about getting a test or figuring that out? How do you guys do that? How do you let someone know when their exposure limit is too much or if they're within it? What's the process in helping people determine that?
We, if it's noise, we have digital readout equipment that takes that noise sample constantly throughout the day, provides us with an exposure number at the end of the day. If we're doing air contaminant monitoring, then we have usually an air sampling pump. We pull air through some type of media that collects the contaminant. We then send it to a laboratory and they do the analysis, and we can say for that period of time, this is how much material was in the breathing zone of the employee.
Oh.
And for instance, like for welding fume, we take that sample right inside the helmet. We put a cassette inside the helmet and we suck air through that cassette, and then then have the cassette analyzed.
Oh, so that's, I mean, you can't get any closer than that unless you were going to put it in their nose.
Exactly. Yes, we want to be in the breathing zone.
Right.
The definition
Right.
of breathing zone is within 6 inches of your air intake.
So when you're talking about let's say weld fume exposure, what,
Yes.
I mean, when you would typically see someone that was inside or outside that range, what's that range look like? How does that measured?
The range of welding fume exposure.
Yeah. So if you would think if someone was welding for 10 minutes or if they were welding all day, how much would you actually, if I was a welder and I was looking at this and I go, how would I know whether I am exposed too much or if I'm within the acceptable limit?
Most everyone now is a MIG welder. Most of your welding in industry is MIG, metal inert gas, and it's a wire-fed system. I would say rule of thumb, if you're production welding and you're welding more than 3 hours a day and you don't have some sort of ventilation system to collect that fume, you're probably going to be exposed above the Michigan exposure limit. Exposure
Gotcha.
limits are different depending upon where you're located.
Uh-huh.
This gets to be a long story, but Michigan's exposure limit is 5 milligrams of contaminant per cubic meter of air.
Okay.
The federal OSHA states it's still 10.
Okay.
It really needs to come down from there, from either place. A couple of years ago, IARC, the International Association for the Research of Cancer, has now called welding fume a carcinogen.
Oh, wow.
So there's that. There's manganese is in all of welding fume. The manganese exposure limit for the feds was 5. It's going to point, ACGIH, American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, is recommending it be limited to 0.02.
Wow. So things are getting even less exciting, right? Hopefully with the weld.
Yeah. They hopefully they will get less exciting. Right now,
Yeah.
there's if you're a welder, you're overexposed to manganese, and probably welding fume in some states if you weld more than 3 hours a day.
Gotcha. So the functionality and having a good system in place to help get that weld fume away from that operator is becoming, or become more and more aware how important that is for people's health and safety.
We're recognizing now the importance of getting away from the welding operators. Definitely.
So if someone's out there, they have a weld shop and they're thinking, man, I would love to have someone like Bob come in and look at my operation and tell me where I could, kind of make things better or help. How would someone do that? I mean, is this a paid service? Is this a government service from what you used to do? How would someone get in touch with their, not dental hygienist? What am I saying here? Our industrial hygienist that is in their area.
If they're in a state plan state, if their OSHA program is ran by the state, all of the state plan states have consultants that come in free of charge. I'm not in federal states. I'm not aware. I think some of them also have consultation programs that first thing I would do is I'd check the web and see if my state had that availability for free service. If not, there's a variety of paid consultants that will come out. There are many organizations that have IHs working for them that can come out and do this monitoring.
Gotcha. So now I know a lot of people would say, why would I ever want to call OSHA into my facility? That's just a scary thing to do. But from what I remember talking about earlier, kind of what you guys did and what the other side of OSHA does, they're a little bit separate. Is that right? The consulting side as comparison to?
Compliance and consultation are totally separate.
Right.
Compliance does not know where consultation goes or what they do. We, as a consultant, we are requested by the employer to come in. We provide a report to the employer that gives them some direction of what they need to do to come into compliance. So it's a free voluntary chance to come into compliance with standards. There is a catch. Consultation does request a gentleman's agreement that they will fix what's broken. If we find something seriously wrong, they need to fix it.
Right.
We're required at some point in time to turn it over to compliance.
Right.
Very seldom happens because typically the people that have consultation come in are willing, they know that up front, and they're willing to fix what's broken.
Right. They're coming to you saying, we know there is an issue. We're trying to find a solution.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's such good information. You guys with OSHA out there are trying to, really help make the workplace a safer, cleaner environment, a healthier environment. And that's what we're here at Imperial. That's what we try to do too. And we're a little bit on the other side of it, just continue to build equipment. So it's really great to hear, out there in the field that what we're doing can really help, help somebody go home safer to their families at night. And that's what we're shooting for here.
Everyone laughs at that statement. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. In this case, it's really true.
Right.
It's really true.
Yeah. Well, Bob, do you have anything else that might be helpful for anyone out there if they're listening, or if they're thinking about, man, I don't know if I have any exposure to anything, or?
I think it's never a bad idea to have your consultant come in and review your data sheets, review your operations, and see if there are things that might be of interest to look deeper into. Again, over time, you kind of get a feel for what can be a problem, and with that length of service comes some knowledge that makes it easier to tell what might be an issue.
Yeah. Well, Bob, just thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it, and I just hopefully maybe we'll do something again in the future, and we can cover some other topics. Really appreciate your wealth of knowledge and you being willing to share it with us.
Well, you're certainly welcome.
So, well, hey, everyone who is listening out there, if you want to reach out to us more, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and now we have a TikTok. So you can watch us on TikTok. So, but once again, thanks for listening, and everybody out there, stay healthy and stay safe.
Thanks, Donovan.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for listening to the Dusty Jobs Podcast. Breathe better, work safer.